Today we are going to be looking at how to make more advanced selections than we've been doing. Um, this is just an example of something that I quickly selected, which is this dog image, and you can see it has like hairs and like fine details, and you can fine tune it even more. But we're gonna jump into Photoshop, and I'm going to introduce today the eraser tools. So in your toolbox here, there is this eraser tool that has like a little scissor icon on, and E is the tool for eraser in general, right? So no matter what tool I'm on, when I hold down E, when I tap E, you can see it goes to this, and we all know toggling in between other tools that are in that same quick key, you hold down the shift key, so shift E, you could see it goes to the magic eraser tool, or shift E again and it goes to the regular eraser tool. And just to kind of show you like how these things work, right now I just have this file open. It's just a background lock layer, but if I make a copy of it, Command J, that will just duplicate it. Really the first step I should do is go to Image, CMYK, because we like to work in CMYK. I'm not going to flatten it. And just to kind of show you, I'm going to create a layer below this copy. So I still have my background, that's the original image, intact, and we're going to use that later. Because really the eraser is a destructive tool, but the way I'm going to show you how to use it today is in a non-destructive way. So I'm just going to create a new layer in between these two layers, and I'm going to fill it with a contrasting color. I've selected this green, and so now you can see anything I do to this layer, I'm going to just use the eraser tool once, and right now I have like this hard edge brush as my eraser, and that operates the same way as the brush tool. If I want to soften it, I can hold shift and bracket left, and you can see up here shift and bracket right a couple times will make that edge more precise. And then same thing with opacity that we usually do. If you hit the number keys, it'll change the opacity. 5 is 50, 2 is 20, 0 goes back to 100. And again, I'm just literally on this top layer, a copy of this background, the doggy layer here. And I'm just going to click the eraser tool on it once, and you can see that it has erased that, kind of like, just to zoom into this, you could see like right there, it erased that little spot there, and now it's showing through to this green background. So again, that's destructive editing. I've destroyed this layer, but that's okay, because again, I'm going to show you ways to use these tools where they are non-destructive. So I could just use this brush tool and kind of erase stuff, if I want like that. Or what I really want to show you today is the background eraser tool. So again, the background eraser tool is like this tool, but it has a little scissor icon on it. So I'm just going to hit Shift E till I get to it. And then, all these things you can play with this tool. So I'm just going to introduce to you like the options that you can play with, and showing you the ones we need for this. So once you have this tool selected, there's a couple options up here. When I use this tool, I use this setting, which is sampling once. Now what that means is where the crosshair is on this tool, that little plus sign that's like in the middle of my brush circle there, it's going to sample from wherever I click there, but only if I click it here, it's going to sample just from that one point that I click. If I do this, which is sampling continuous, it will continue to sample the entire way that I'm using the tool. So the reason why I like this sample once is because if I click on one area, I know that is going to only sample that color of the background. And we're working with a simple white background for this, just to start off easy with this tool. But those are the two options. There's this other option here, which is sampling background swatch, which is, if you do have like a solid color and you want to just sample it first, and then, you can use this tool based off of that sample. You can do that. So actually for like an all white background, this works, but because I want to show you this middle tool, and I'm going to use that on a couple different images, I'm going to stick with that. So sampling once, that's the one I think that is the most useful. And this other options that you have up here is limits. So there's discontiguous, contiguous, and fine edges. So contiguous means that it's only like continuing any pixels that kind of stay within that selection, right? So if I select that white and that's my sample point, it will only give me white stuff that is connected to that point still. So like if there's any white, on these inner bits here or like that, it won't pick that up. So I'm going to leave it on discontiguous because discontiguous actually allows me to use that brush and still pick up any of the same sample colors, even if it's like inside of, that pixel border. And find edges is very similar to contiguous. So again, those are helpful if if you have like just a solid background and there's no areas like these little areas of white or areas of the background that are shining through, like there are in these bits of hair. And then the last thing is tolerance. Now this is one where you have to keep playing with. So generally when I'm using this tool, I set it to this first setting here, the sample once, and then I set it to discontiguous. Those are the two settings that I pretty much have always when I'm using this tool. But tolerance makes a big difference. So I always start at 50, and sometimes it takes like a little kind of troubleshooting and a little experimenting. So if you want to start with a lower tolerance and then work your way up to whatever the highest tolerance, where it's picking up only the background and not the details of your edging here. So again, I'm just going to get into using this tool now. I haven't used it yet. I'm just kind of explaining the setup here. But you can see once I click, now remember where that center point is, that crosshair, it's going to sample that and it's going to get rid of that color and and everything kind of like in that color range. And just so you can see, like right here, like in this particular file, there's like these little bits of like white in here. So even though I'm sampling from the outside, it will still pick up those little bits of white like in there. So I am gonna just start using this now, and because I have green on the background, you're gonna see that's kind of revealed. So again, because this is an all white background, it's really easy for me to just click once and kind of drag, and you can see even all these points in here, they all are getting kind of picked up by this effect. Now again, a solid color background is much easier to use any selection tools on really, but especially these. And this will work for any kind of fine detail thing like this, and I'll give you other examples. I'll use this tool on other examples after this part, but I'm just going to kind of quickly click and drag different areas of this image to just kind of clean it up. And again, this one goes really quickly because the background is white. Now if you're dealing with an image that has a lot of different stuff in the background, you would click and then drag one area and click and drag another area, and it's a little slower that way, and then you would just like kind of go bit by bit to kind of get what you want. But you can see already here, just from doing that, I have like all these kind of like little hair details that have been maintained, and they're not perfect, and just like most of these selection tools are not perfect, but for the amount of time it takes you can get a pretty cool selection picking up some fine details. And again, I know this is destructive, but we will go back and we will show you how to use it non-destructively. So again, I'm going to actually hit Shift E just to go to my regular erase tool. Again, this is the one without any details in here. So the one with the scissors is the background erase tool. That's the one I just used. And the one with the sparkles is the magic eraser tool, which I don't really like to use this because, unless you're shooting on a flat color and nothing inside the image matches, because I'll just show you real quickly. If I use this, even though I'm clicking all the way out here on this white, I can actually shut it down by using contiguous, but when I do that, it will eliminate other white areas from this. So I'm just going to click one time just so you can see, and it kind of gets rid of all these other things. So I don't like to use it. I like to kind of use the background eraser tool than just do it manually. But I'm going to go to my regular eraser tool, Shift E, just to get there. And I kind of have a harder edge brush here, and I'm just going to get rid of all the other stuff back here. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect if you're following for the lesson to submit your classwork file. This is pretty easy. So that is that. I've done a pretty good job at eliminating most of the stuff. Now what I'm going to do is, because this is destructive, I've erased all that background. What I actually want to do is I want to take that and I'm going to use that to mask a copy of this layer. So I'm going to click on the background again, Command J again, Command bracket right to move it up, and then I'm going to select this. So I'm going to hold down Command and select it, and now you can see I have the selection here. I'm going to hide this original thing that was destructive, and then I am going to go to my select and mask, which is something that we're familiar with. Now if I have any selection tool clicked, meaning like the marquee tool or the whatever, the wand tool, select and mask is usually up in this top menu bar. If I have a non-selection tool, it's not usually up here. But even if it's not, you can always hit Command Option R to launch it. So now I have this select and mask tool, and again, this is just kind of deciding what my mask selection is going to be. So what I'm going to do is, there's all these options in here. You can turn on the smart radius if you want, edge detection, but I'm actually going to show you a new feature in this that I use sometimes. And well, first I'm going to exit out of here though, because even though I have like this pretty good selection, there is some impurities in there, imperfections rather. I am going to mask this with that. So now you can see I have this mask and it does a pretty good job, and it is non-destructive because when I turn it off by holding Shift and clicking on it, I can hide it and show it, and you can see that it kind of gets all these hairs, but there is still that white edge pollution. So what I'm going to do now is, on this mask, when you click on this mask, you can still use that select and mask tool, and it will modify the mask rather than you like having to launch the selection and then go back to select the mask. You don't even need to do that. You can just click on the mask, and then Command Option R will launch your select and mask tools. And the new option I want to show you is at the bottom. So when you first launch this, I always click this or have my settings saved to don't remember settings. So I like to start with a clean slate every time. But if you scroll all the way to the down to the bottom, there's this option, decontaminate colors. So I'm going to click that first, and you can see once I do that, it automatically cleans up all those like wispy edges or whatever, right? And it kind of makes it like way better than having those white pixels showing. Now what this does though is it destructively edits your original image layer to decontaminate. So it's actually adding some colors, some darker colors in to kind of just get rid of those white pixels. And again, I have mine at 100%. You can kind of play around with it a little bit if you want to still have some of that lightness shining. Maybe it's like light detailing or something like that. It really depends on the image. But 100% will really kind of get those hair details like perfect. But because it is doing a destructive change, and I will show you that in a second, what I do is I output to a new layer with mask. Now what that is going to do is that's going to duplicate the original image. So again, it's not destructively editing the original, but it is a destructive edit, but it's creating a new layer for that destructive edit. So I'm going to hit OK. And actually, before I even hit OK, I'm going to show you one new tool in here, which is this Refine Edge Brush tool. Now this is a tool that can be used to like refine these like wispy edges even more, and you can see here, or where there's like a little bit of like that white color still left in it. If I use this Refine Edge tool, and this works just like the brush with the size, you can use the brackets to make it bigger or smaller. I think this is pretty good. And when I'm just going to click and drag, you can see by default it has this plus symbol, and I'm just going to click and drag along this edge a little bit. And you can see once I do that, it actually cleans up all that. See, it used to look like this, but now it's kind of cleaning it up so it shows through to that green in the back. And I'm just going along the edges. It doesn't have to be perfect. But again, this is just something you can do to try to clean up these edges in the files. And, again, it is a memory intensive tool, so it does take a lot of, time, and it spins sometimes. But that's, again, so just cleaning this up even more, I can get in here and clean up some of these other areas if I really want to get into the detail. But for this purpose, I'll let you kind of decide how deep into it you want to go. But I'm going to hit OK. And you can see it duplicated that original layer, but now I'm going to show you what it did. It's kind of funky. And when I unhide this mask, it added all these darker bits to it. Okay, so that destructively edited a layer, but at least it copied it, so we have a copy. So really, you don't need to do anything else. You can kind of just work off of this and know you have that backup layer behind it. And there's other things you can do too to kind of fine tune it even more. Like if you want to go on the mask, you know, some of these details of the ear, like maybe got a little too blown out. So I can kind of come in and brush back some white into my mask, you know, with white as my foreground color. Take the brush tool and, you know, again, you can just do like the full brush, like, you know, to get some of these details back, just like parts of the ear, or like, you know, maybe there's some bits like in here that you can see are kind of showing through the green that are not meant to be, you know, that initial brush tool picked up a little too much. So you can come back and just edit some of those, you know, areas that you think are getting picked up and were like too clean. And then that's basically it. You know, again, you can keep editing these things, and if you use overlay as a blend mode with your brush tool, it becomes a little bit more subtle, bringing back some things, and you can even do it on the edges to bring back some of those wispy like areas without affecting the edge. And again, you can always go back and hit Command Option R and relaunch that select mask dialog and play with some of these other things like contrast, you know. Shifting edge actually helps sometimes. So, you know, you can play with those things, but I think like this was pretty good level of detail for how quickly that took to do, right? That was like, you know, even with me explaining it kind of slow in this format, it still like only took like, you know, 7 or 8 minutes. But again, you can quickly kind of do these advanced selections, and I will go beyond this in additional parts to this tutorial, but this is the gist of this tool. Okay, thank you very much.